so we can see.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks again for having me here, Deepak and everyone. And like introduced, my name is Sophie Xu from Transmission Planning PG&E, and good afternoon. And today, the topic I'm going to present is the potential transmission challenges from high IBR, obviously in California because I'm from PG&E, and how grid forming inverters could help in this kind of scenarios. Okay, so this is the agenda that I'm going to present today. So basically three major information. The first is the California RPS goals, and the second is what are the potential challenges or current challenges that we're facing, focusing on the reliability space in transmission planning. And then the third part of the presentation is the I did some testing on the grid forming inverters that's being currently reviewed and discussed by the WEC model subcommittee, and just providing some of the results and how I think, from my view, grid forming inverter could help in a high IBR scenario in the future. So these are the three portions of information in the slides. And obviously, I'm going to start with the RPS goals. So before we get to the state's RPS goals, this is just a quick overview of PG&E system. For those who are not very familiar with PG&E, PG&E is California's largest energy provider, and we serve over 16 million people across 70,000 square miles in northern and central California. So on the map on the right, you can see the gray area is the entire California, and the blue on top of it is the territory from PG&E. I also overlaid the 500 kV major transmission lines in our territory, and you can see overall we're pretty strongly connected from the north and the south to our neighbor system, which is the rest of the WEC. And throughout our territory, we basically have three parallel 500 kV lines going through our territory. And about the generation mix, just a note that the picture on the right that you can see 2021 power mix is the actual energy that we served, not the capacity in generation fleet. And you can see by 2021, PG&E already have 50% of the electric energy served by renewables and 39% by nuclear, and then the rest is by large hydro and natural gas. So by looking at this mix, you can probably tell that we're serving energy, not just renewables, heavily on renewables, and we are also very clean. So 93% of the greenhouse gas-free resources, by 2021, 90% of our energy is served by greenhouse gas-free resources. And by looking at the chart here, the orange is the national average for emission rate for per megawatt hour of energy served. And the right hand, which I'm pointing to for PG&E, is our emission rate. And you can see it's nearly 90% cleaner than the national average issued by 2020. And PG&E is also very aggressive on adopting rooftop solar and EV. So right now, 1 in 5 solar rooftops in the country is in PG&E service area. And 1 in 6 of the EVs are plugged in PG&E grid. So we are very high on the DG portion, and we are also very aggressive on increasing the EV in our territory. So the next page is basically the new renewable goals in California. In 2018, the Senate Bill 100 was signed into law, and in which it requires 50% of the renewable portfolio by 2025. And then by 2030, 60% of the energy needs to be served by renewables. And by 2024, sorry, I slipped. 100% of the energy needs to be served by clean and carbon-free renewable energy. On the right-hand side and also on the bottom is just something additional to the electric energy that is required to be renewables. The state also has very aggressive goals on further reducing the carbon emission from other sectors, including the industrial, obviously power generation, and also transportation. This is also posing a very big challenge on the electric grid because when we are changing our generation fleet to meet the high renewable goals, there is a large demand increase in the transportation sector because they are electrifying, and that increase the load demand very significantly over the next 10 to 20 years. So we also need to meet those increasing demand by renewables. So that's another challenge. And there is a small chart here on the bottom that shows the much faster load growth in the future years, but this is constantly being corrected and revised because by the data that we collected from distribution load customers and transmission, this estimate in growth may be understating what we're going to see in the electrification in the transportation sector. So that's another challenge that we're facing. So to meet the state goals, here is the plan from PG&E. So obviously, like I mentioned, for the 50% goal by 2025, PG&E is already there. We have 50% is served by renewable by now already. And for 2030, the state goal, I believe, is 60% of renewable. But PG&E is shooting for 70%, that is 10% higher than the state overall goal for renewable portfolio. Another thing worth mentioning is we are planning by 2040 to reach 100% renewable. That is 5 years ahead of the state goal. The state goal is by 2045. And while waiting for the rest of the state achieving the 100% renewable goal, PG&E also has another goal that is by 2050, we want to be both climate and nature positive in energy system. So here's a brief explanation about what is climate positive and nature positive. So climate positive means that PG&E will work to remove more greenhouse gases than we emit, and will also help to enable our customers and hometowns to further shrink their carbon footprint. And nature positive means that going forward, not just avoiding environmental impacts, PG&E will also invest in projects and initiatives to restore the biodiversity of our ecosystems. So these are our future goals, which is definitely aligned with the state goals and with some of the highlights that we have. So next will be the transmission challenges, focusing on the reliability space. Obviously, with all these goals, all the changes, there will be transmission challenges in planning horizon. Today, we're more talking about the reliability portion of it. So before we talk about the challenges, just a little bit about PG&E in regards to how it looks, what it looks like in the WEC system. So on the left is the major, I would say, backbone transmission system in the WEC system, and PG&E is over here on the west coast, kind of in the south part. And you can see the red lines are the 500 kV lines. And some people call the WEC system is like a donut. You have all these strong connected 500 kV lines, and also some of the 345 kV, a little bit of 230 kV system connecting on the other side on the east, making a loop. And this loop is being strengthened over time with other projects that's going to be in service. We can talk a little bit more about that down the road in the slides today. And then here is a zoomed in view of PG&E system. Like I said, we have basically from north to south throughout 3 500 kV lines in parallel. And also if you look at the lines, pretty much all the major lines on the transmission corridors have series compensations. So that makes our electric connection even more tighter in the system. And just a rough idea about how closely connected the system is. So I did just a rough measurement from the top north substation to the bottom south substation. It's about 500 miles. And in between these 500 miles, not just the three, we have 3 parallel lines. And basically in that distance, we have about 7 substations in between. So then you can imagine the average length of the 500 kV transmission lines. And with those 500 kV transmission lines, you also have series compensation about 60 to 70% compensation. So mostly PG&E's reliability issue on transmission right now is thermal issue because of the close connection. So here is more like the flow that we're seeing, not just in PG&E, but overall in California. On the left is what we used to have before the high renewable scenario kicks in. And you can see we import from the Northwest for the clean hydro energy. And Southern California also import from the east. So if you look a little careful, you can see multiple circles in the map. Those are the load centers. So I would say the load centers are pretty distributed. It's not like you transfer power in long distance to just one or very limited load centers, then your flow would be transferred in much longer distance. But in California, this is what we see. And then moving from the past to kind of current, you're gonna see what it looks like, just like the map on the right. We have more renewable energies, primarily solar, in the area, in different area. And the flow direction really didn't change much. But I think a lot of the solar in the local area can offset a large amount of the load during the peak generation period. So the flow is, I think the distance, I would say the megawatt distance being transferred comparing to in the past is kind of reduced. So that's what we're seeing today. And obviously it is gonna continue to evolve over time when we have more renewables. And another view is looking into the future. This is a map from California ISO. They laid out the major renewable pockets by area and what is in a base case right now and what could be in the future in a sensitivity case. And you can see very aggressive increase in all the area. But again, it's pretty well distributed throughout the state. It's not like you have a remote area that you have a lot of renewable and then you have load centers away from it. So this is kind of the pattern that we see. Here is just the PG&E portion of the system again. The idea I would like to share about here is that you can see in the map on the right, a lot of yellow circles are load centers in PG&E. And they kind of are aligned or very close to the generation, the renewable generation pockets. So that's kind of a blessing to our system in nature, so in reliability in nature, because then you offset a lot of the generation locally before it goes on transmission and transfer in long distance, which could cause reliability issues. The only exception is kind of in the northwest area that in Humboldt area, there's a big, I think there could be potentially big projects like offshore wind is going to be developed, and then if those projects connect to this weak or kind of remote portion of the grid, there could be reliability issues. But right now, I think they're still in very, very preliminary phase, and we haven't seen a project stabilized in the interconnection queue yet. So this is basically kind of the nature of our grid and what is the potential issues right now. Like I mentioned, is still thermal. Another view of what we're seeing for future renewables can be put in this table that you can see. I know there are a lot of numbers. Maybe you can just look by looking at the different numbers compared by the red. So you can see the portfolio for 2030 compared to 2031, and then 2032, there's a very aggressive increase to meet the state renewable goals. And by 2032, the preferred system plan needs about 40 gigawatts of new generation. Obviously, renewable needs to be connected to meet the state goals. And this is very aggressive, and we're still working on it, both from the generation interconnection process, the procurement process, different planning processes to coordinate to achieve this. And here is kind of another overview, or give you a taste about what we're really facing right now. Like I said again, mostly the challenge we're seeing is still the thermal or the capacity on the grid is being challenged by the large amount of interconnection requests. So the table here on the first, well, there are three tables. The first table shows that what is the total capacity that we have on the network to interconnect the more generation without needing any upgrades. And obviously, it's just around 5,000 megawatts is way far away from the goal. And then the next one is by enabling RAS, how much we can achieve. I would say by comparing the experience from different utilities, California has been pretty aggressive on applying RAS to achieve capacity. I think during this, kind of a historical moment that there's a lot of demand and a lot of needs to interconnect the renewables, RAS can be a quicker and cost-effective way to do it. But obviously, there could be downsides down the road when you have more RAS in the system. There could be complications when the system condition changes. How can you adapt your existing RAS to the new system? And here I want to highlight that even though PG&E's number for enabling more capacity by RAS is kind of small, but PG&E is already, I think, leading in the amount of RAS we have in our system. Right now, the existing RAS that we have in our system is more than 50. And among these 50, some of them are really complicated. Our system protection used to say that we have one of the RAS that we have on the 500 kV is like the most complicated RAS on this continent. I'm happy to see if anyone else has more complicated RAS that, we can dethrone our RAS position in this space. But obviously, pretty much throughout California, we are using a lot of RAS to enable capacity. And then transmission under development, we have some transmission projects, but obviously the amount of capacity that we can unlock by the existing transmission projects are not enough to meet the state goals. So with all these challenges, here is a kind of a conceptual map. It's also from California. 2 years ago, I think they started to look into how the 20-year system configuration could look like. And this is kind of a conceptual map showing that what could be the additional transmission projects. If you look at all the dashed lines, these are the potentially the additional projects that can be built to meet the state goal, renewable goals for in the long run for the 20-year or even longer. And major things I want to highlight is basically in addition to some internal upgrades, could be potentially the third parallel line in most part of the California system, 500 kV line, to further absorb the solar generation. The other thing that could be big is the offshore wind and out-of-state wind, and that needs major transmission development to interconnect and to solve any potential reliability issues. Another thing that I want to mention is that all the offshore renewables are basically located on the coast of the PG&E service territory. So a lot of challenge for us to absorb, to interconnect the renewables from offshore wind supply. So with all these challenges, I would say even though today or in today's 10-year out transmission planning studies, even though mostly what we see is thermal issues still, but in the future, moving into this kind of paradigm and further reducing the synchronized machine on the system, we might be seeing reliability issues. And on top of that, this is the map for the other states, right, in addition to California that has renewable goals. And you can see pretty much all the west coastal states has 100%, has established 100% renewable goals. And some of the inland states like Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico also set 100% renewable goals for sometime in the future. So with all these changes, a lot of changes outside the California grid would have significant change as well. And with all these combining together, I think at some point we're going to see potentially other reliability issues rather than thermal. So these are potentially the transmission challenges that we're seeing or we could be seeing in the future. And the last portion is how grid forming inverters could help. Like I said, I did some initial testing with the models that is being reviewed by WEC. But before we get to that, sorry, I missed the page. So I want to kind of share some of the things that I see from the work from NREL and other national labs collaboratively from one research paper, I think, or article that is the research roadmap on the grid forming inverters. The reason I want to share this is because before we think about how we adopt grid forming inverter, how grid forming inverter can help us to achieve our goals, we want to have maybe a little bit thought about when do we need grid forming inverters and what kind of the problems that grid forming inverter can solve for us. Well, this is kind of intuitive, but I think I haven't seen a lot of clear explanation on these kind of topics. So that's why I'd like to share this page and combine it with the next page before we get to the test results. Obviously, the grid forming inverter application in microgrid or islands like Puerto Rico, Hawaii has been tested, and there are a lot of promising good results being shared in the industry. So I would say kind of the projection of what could, from what time frame grid forming inverter can be applied to where the first two is happening. The third one, I'm not very clear about what is the definition of a larger island grids, but I would think this is also good as moving forward and maybe already applying. And then what I want to focus on is the top two. So the top two point out maybe in the potentially in 3 or more years later, in different part of the system for weak grid issues, that grid forming inverter could provide better solution. And then for the 10 to 30 year time frame, grid forming inverter probably can be adopted in the bulk grid. I would think is something like WEC system or the Eastern Interconnection or Texas. I think I generally, from what I see from planning horizon, I would agree with these two kind of projection. But I think what I would like to further explore with everyone is what is the adoption approach, right? How and when, for what kind of issue we start to adopt grid forming inverter. Would that be just a blanket kind of requirement? Or it will be by needs, right? By certain needs that evolves to a point that we need grid forming inverter, and then later on we see more needs, and then we cover it throughout the planning horizon. So this is something that we probably need to further think about. And then I think I'm a believer about probably we will start with by identifying the needs, and then start to adopt grid forming inverter instead of FERC or NERC give some kind of requirement that grid forming inverter has to be installed instead of grid following. And following that kind of thought, I think we need to be more clear about what are the potential challenges in the future system in reliability. Right? This is probably not stranger to most of you, that in the future, what could be the potential issues. So I think this is really good. This is also from the research roadmap for grid forming inverter by NREL, another research organization. And it's laid out by time frame, right? So basically in a shorter time, I think it's more about the dynamic transient performance, right? After the fault is cleared, before I would think within seconds, there could be angle stability issues. And then I see the grid forming inverter control angle is also listed here. And I also see of the inverters in the future to control the voltage, terminal voltage, and to maintain a stability of control during system disturbance. And the next one is more about the classic voltage stability that I think we're studying in the system, reactive power flows, and potential voltage collapse issues, and those kind of network related. And long-term, obviously, before we go to long-term, and obviously a little bit longer after a few cycles, upon clearing the fault, the frequency stability, the frequency regulation kind of goes hand in hand, is also a big challenge when we have more renewables and less synchronized machine. And on top of these issues, I think there are two things also needs to be at least kept an eye on. One is the weak grid stability. The other would be the control interactions or control stability of the inverter-based resources. So these are the potential challenges that I could see from the future high renewable grid. And by all these, I'm testing. I did some tests on the grid forming inverter models in different categories of renewable issues, including the voltage stability. I think is more network voltage stability, potential angular stability, and frequency response. So let's get to the test results. So before I show any plots, I just want to show this is the basic model I kind of borrowed from the diagram from Wei. He developed the models that I used for testing. And the basic idea is that I believe everyone probably knows that his model is a droop control based grid forming inverter model. And the basic idea is that the inverter will control its internal voltage magnitude and angle, which is here depicted as the delta E, rather than controlling the P and the Q like a grid following inverter. And during the fault, its phase angle will be still governed by the droop control and will continue to change. And upon the fault clearing, the phase angle between, instead of like grid following inverter, to my understanding after fault clearing, the IQ and IP can be better controlled or manipulated by the control scheme. But for grid forming inverter, is really, if you don't have additional controls on top of it, is really the P and Q output is kind of the natural response from the internal voltage, the phase angle, and its magnitude. And here is just a general, very quick test about, what you will see if you have a grid following inverter responding to a system fault. The top is the voltage, and the second one in red is the reactive response, and the third is the real power response. And the last one is the maximum current of the inverter. I want to point it here, I want to place it here because I think it plays a big role in the performance. So basically in the control, if you allow the inverter to have overload capacity, and then you can see a big jump on the Imax during the fault or during the stressed system condition. Another feature that I want to probably bring to everyone's attention is that you can see that grid forming inverter upon fault clearing could be providing an overshoot and a very, very quick boost on the real power. And the reactive power actually went down before it goes up. Again, I think this is potentially driven by the change of the magnitude and the angle of the internal voltage, and that drives the performance like this. We're going to talk more about that performance later. And to better understand, how it's going to look like, how, this will change the grid by adopting grid forming inverter. I compared the same fault response from grid following inverter, and then on the bottom is the synchronized machine. And you can tell that the dynamic responses from the grid forming inverter is more like a synchronized machine. For synchronized machine, upon fault clearing is real power also providing an overshoot. I wouldn't say an overshoot, go up really quickly. That's because physically its kinetic energy was accumulating during the fault. And when the fault clears, then it will go up and accelerate, and then oscillate, and hopefully we have enough inertia, and then it stabilizes in a post-contingency, post-transient state. And also when the fault is cleared because of the really high boost on the real power, the acceleration cause the real power goes up a lot. The reactive power of the generation also goes down a little bit and then oscillates along with the real power. Although the grid forming inverter doesn't provide this kind of oscillation, but it's very similar in PQ response upon the fault clearing because of how it's designed, the nature of its control. And grid following inverter on the right hand on the top, you can see, well, I will have to put caveat that grid following inverter can perform like this, but it needs to be properly tuned in the controls. And based on my experience reviewing the models and working with manufacturers, sometimes it's not very perfectly achievable. But let's say we have a perfectly tuned control in the grid following inverter, and you can see upon fault clearing, the one actually in this case the Q response is in the green on the bottom. So you can see it quickly boosts up the Q, and then there will be a more gradual recovery of the P. And that's obviously better for transient voltage recovery comparing to the performance from the grid forming and the synchronous machine. So these are kind of the difference. And then I did a further test to see with—
Hey, Sophie?
Yes.
Quick time check, 10 minutes left.
Okay, I'll be quick. So I did a quick check about the voltage performance with using on a network and using grid following and grid forming. So initially I got the green and blue plots. They're kind of pretty much the similar recovery, with grid forming a little bit better, slightly better. But there's one caveat I want to put here is because the red one from grid forming has 2%, 200% or 2.0 per unit overload capability. I understand that I heard from different sources that they could be possible, but I think there could be cost associated to it. And when we put into requirement, this 200% overload capability may not be, achievable by manufacturers. So I did another test, which is the line in green. I reduced the overload capability from 200% to 125%. Still kind of 25% overload capability more than the grid following, because grid following here doesn't have the overload capability that I in my model. And then you can see a pretty significant voltage dip post-contingency. I think it's majorly because of the recovery, faster recovery in real power and kind of the reduced Q in post-contingency causing this. And these are the plots for, because I don't have much time left, and so I will leave it to questions if someone has any questions in detail for the detailed plots comparison. And here, just to contemplate, what we see in the voltage stability testing, understanding the nature of the control in grid forming inverter is different than following. So the recovery of the P and the Q is not very controllable. But by testing, the performance, there could be voltage concerns if we don't have additional control or improving I would think, if we don't improve the performance of P and Q from grid forming inverter. And for the question I would ask is, if we start to adopt grid forming inverter on BES, I heard that it could be as easy as we flip the switch on existing grid following inverters to convert it to grid forming inverter. But my question is, with this kind of voltage performance, we want to be very careful before we flip the switch, because we could see voltage concerns after we flip it. And the other thing I want to say is, I didn't test it, but obviously there are a lot of tests proving that grid forming inverter will be more stable in a weak grid than grid following. However, I still want to caveat that in weak grid, although grid forming inverter can be stable, control as expected in performance. But if you are expecting this kind of performance, that gives you a voltage dip post-contingency, and weak grid tend to have even worse voltage recovery, and the voltage is more sensitive to reactive compensation, then you may also end up with a voltage stability concern or issue in the weak grid with the performance like this on the green chart. So these are the things I think we need to further think about before we adopt grid forming inverter for local voltage issues. And I think local voltage issues could be the starting point of it if we think by need, thinking about the approach by need to adopt the grid forming inverter, because that could happen sooner than frequency stability issues, where any additional need to stabilize angular stability issues on the grid. Potentially recommending that we can add additional controls to address this. I've been talking to Wei, I think he's working on some of the potential solutions for this. If there's additional control or any way that we can address this kind of voltage control, then I think grid forming inverter can be adopted much sooner. Another thing I want to just kind of highlight, but won't spend a lot of time, is that grid forming inverter does have angle, I would say phase angle stability issues. This is just a test to show that post-contingency, because during the contingency, the system conditions is very severe. So the phase angle has already risen to a very high level. So post-contingency, after the fault is cleared, the phase angle cannot be kind of diverged, cannot be stabilized. So the grid forming inverter kind of failed to reestablish stable operating point, and hence there's this phase angle stability issue associated with the grid forming inverter. By just some limited testing, I think this stability issue tends to be more tolerant to system condition compared to the angular stability of synchronized machine. But obviously a lot more tests, and how we tackle this issue needs to be probably further tested and investigated. And last thing tested is the frequency response. So for frequency response, I did a test on kind of a 10-year out scenario in the WEC system with high renewable scenario. And what I did is I basically, from the blue and the red is basically either all the frequency responses from grid following inverter or from grid forming inverter. And the red is the grid forming inverter, and the blue line is the results of the grid following inverter. And obviously, grid forming inverter provides much faster and effective frequency response compared to the grid following inverter. The only thing that I can see a little bit not as good as grid following is the roll curve tends to be a little higher, faster than grid following, but it rescued the frequency much sooner. So I would think it still, outperforms the grid following inverter. And these are just basically the performance of individual grid following versus grid forming in a frequency event. And this is what I borrowed from Andrew Isaacs. I'm not sure if he's here today, but he's kind of giving you the theory why grid following inverter or grid forming inverter responds much quicker. I wouldn't try to explain in a really good way, but my kind of shallow understanding is that grid forming inverter, because of its design is controlled by nature, it sees the deviation and it establish an angle deviation that drives the P control much faster than grid following inverter. So that's pretty much the frequency response, and obviously grid forming inverter is more preferred. And looking back on, how could be the potential pathway to adopt the grid forming inverter on large grid, I think today, if we could improve the P and Q control of the grid forming inverters, I think either by flipping the switch or addressing some of the issues that we see in the reliability studies could be a start, and it could start even today or a couple of years down the road. And again, I want to put a caveat that these are just the time that I roughly think of and open to all the ideas, and this may not be exact. And a little bit longer into the future, I think in certain places, the angular stability, the oscillation or inter-area oscillation, like some of the modes in WEC, may start to appear to be more severe. And these are the potential scenarios that grid forming inverter can help to either create damping or create more synthetic inertia to help. And then down the road, 10 to 30 years, obviously, when a lot of the system synchronized machine is being replaced with grid inverters, and we may need a better performance on the frequency response from inverter-based resource. Obviously, grid forming inverter is a better candidate. And I think a further study probably is needed to see at what point we need to start to interconnect grid forming inverter instead of grid following, because if we keep adding grid following, if at some point most of the system is grid following resource, generation resource index instead of grid forming, then another control issue may arise because grid following cannot stabilize the system, or 100% grid following cannot stabilize the system. But what about 90%, 85%, things like that? So we need to probably start the tipping point. And then before that tipping point, we need to introduce grid forming inverter instead of grid following. So this will be the last page. So basically, in addition to a lot of things I tested on transmission connected inverter-based resource, distribution is very also, DG is also growing very fast in California. And the top plot is what we see just a few days ago, April the 12th, the net load on California ISO is almost zero. It's only 600 megawatts because pretty much almost all the load, gross load is offset by the DG, the distributed generation. So imagine at some point from time to time, almost every day, that in the future, the grid is being served both on the demand and the reliability by the distributed energy resource. Then the DG needs to take on all the reliability service responsibilities instead of the transmission. So this is another big task. I don't have a lot of time to do more research, but I think it could be another topic that we need to think about in the future before it comes. And the last two tables are basically some scenarios in the future that we're seeing. And we're obviously seeing potentially a lot more likelihood that you're going to see either zero or negative gross load on the system, meaning that DG could be taking over from time to time during the day the grid load serving and reliability responsibilities. And we probably need to think about in that scenario, what are the additional reliability requirements we need to put on DG and how grid forming inverter would help in that scenario. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Deepak, I hope I didn't run over time too much. And
no worries.